Supporting you in your dog parenting journey. The Dynamic Dog Owner with Debbie Potter. This week's episode of The Dynamic Dog Owner, the podcast designed to support you, the dog parent, in your dog parenting journey. So today we're going to be talking about multiple dog houses. So if you have multiple dogs, or you may have a single dog, but sometimes you want to meet up with family and they have a dog too, and you have to integrate them for a period of time, or whatever. There is a massive difference between having one dog and having more than one dog. I grew up only ever having one dog. We only ever had one dog in the house. My first dog was on as a single dog in our home from when we got him when he was 2.5 until he was about 13. So a good 10 and a half years. And having one dog's, in comparison to having more, quite easy. There's less to think about. There's another podcast episode, look back at it, about whether it's time to get a second dog or not. So if you're considering getting a second, third or fourth, fifth dog. So we've covered that topic about shouldn't you get another dog previously. So go look back at that episode if it's a question on your mind at the moment. But today we're going to talk about if you actually have a multi-dog household, or say those situations where you're integrating different family members' dogs together for like holidays or whatever. So I got a second dog in the household when my first dog Leo was about 13, because I didn't want him. I didn't want a house without a dog in it. When I was growing up, my mum insisted on having 3 months between dogs, because she was like, no, we've got to have time to grieve the first one before we get the next one. I hated those 3 months growing up. They were the worst and the longest time ever. And then when I moved out of home, I had a very short period, I would say not even a year, probably about 6 months, where we didn't have dogs. We rented a flat, we couldn't have pets, and I didn't live with a dog for that 6 months. I didn't like it, and as soon as we could, we had Leo. So I've always lived with dogs, and I didn't want to have that gap. That gap with no dog, to me, was just like absolutely not doing it. So I planned to have another dog come in while Leo was older, pass on all the good habits, etc. And then we would have another dog there. And then listen to previous episodes about, again, why each dog came into my life. But I kind of started collecting them. Maybe I'm getting to that age. I don't know if you've seen those memes on like Instagram, Facebook, etc. That, when a woman gets to a certain age, they go through the many paws, and i.e. you get lots of dogs or cats. More paws in my house, the better. And I would never, now, having had a multi-dog household for the last, 8 years, yes, it's more stressful. Yes, there's more to think about. Yes, it's more expensive. So many things that are less easy. I would never go back to having a single dog household again. I love having a multi-dog household, and I do believe that 3 is the magic number. I think 3 has worked out beautifully for us. Anyway, so how to successfully live with dogs? What do we have to consider to make sure that it goes well? Because it's not easy. So we're going to talk about a few different topics that have kind of just popped into my mind about what's easy, or what makes it hard, what makes it challenging, and things I think you need to know, or at least be aware of when you do have a multi-dog household. So and I think this one is probably the most important out of all of them, is that you have to recognise your dog is an individual. Each dog you have is an individual personality, an individual characteristics, individual preferences. What's right for one isn't right for the other. And I think that, as a multi-dog household owner, family member, whatever I want to call myself, is key. So many people expect we have it with single dogs too, but we expect our next dog to be just like our first one. Well, my first one liked doing this. This one doesn't like doing that. My previous dog always played fetch, but this one doesn't. And we kind of want our dogs to do the dog thing, the classic dog things that you expect them to do, but recognizing their individuals is really important. So all 3 of mine are completely different. Different personalities, different needs, different training, what one likes another one doesn't like, and I think it's really important to recognize that. So for me, I rarely take my dogs together to do stuff, apart from when we go to secure fields and just let them run, because they're so different. They all like doing different stuff, and they're all happy doing different stuff. They're individuals. One will love just going anywhere busy, so I can take him anywhere. The other two aren't too good at busy places. You know, Fred gets overwhelmed because there's just too many new things, too many changes. Dave just gets tired, so he can't keep up. And then he's like, hi, why everyone want to play with me? So, you know, they're different in terms of their character, and therefore what they want to do in life, I have to adapt. So there's nothing wrong with doing things separately with your multi-dog household and doing one activity with one dog, one activity with the other. So, for example, you know, I went out to Windsor the other week and I only took one dog with me. Why? Because he's the dog that would like it. The other two wouldn't. They haven't got the stamina that he has. So he would quite happily go out for an entire day, keep walking, keep going, keep doing the entire day and not be phased, not be tired. The other two, Dave, after half an hour, would be like, I'm done. That's enough for me. He's got greyhound energy. Short, sharp bursts, that's it. Fred, again, because he's very emotional in terms of he's very wary of stuff, he gets overwhelmed quite quickly. So, and again, he doesn't have a lot of stamina. He's a golden retriever. So a long day out for those two is not right, but it is for Rem. So it's not fair for me to drag the other two along for a long day out and them not enjoy it. And equally, it's not fair for Rem to miss out just because the other two miss out. It's no different, I believe, to having kids or, you know, living with people, living as a group, your family. Everyone lives together, but they all have their individual hobbies, individual interests. One will like watching something on the telly, one will like DIY, one will like gardening, one will like something else. One will like going to watch football in the pub, one will like going and crocheting. You know, everyone's different. We don't all have to do every activity together. So you think about your family unit, whoever you live with or whoever your family are. If all of you had to do everything together, you're going to start going, for God's sake, this is boring. It's because you don't have the same interests. I always think back to when I was a kid, we always used to go on when we were in the school holidays, we'd go on an outing a week, which was quite nice, really, quite generous. And they weren't expensive theme parks, but they were like, we'd go to a National Trust place or something. So in the school holidays, one outing a week. And my sister was always into the boring houses. You know, going around the houses, looking at all the history. And I was like, this is so dull. I didn't like it one little bit. But in the school holidays, we'd take it in turns. So one week it was my turn, one week it was her turn, and we'd take it in turns about where we picked. I'm sure I'm remembering this correctly. That's what I'm sure we did. Because my mother was, well, she still is, very fair. So the week it was her choice, every time it was a house. Walking around a house or going to a church or something really bloody boring, in my opinion. Because we differ. And I'd be like, can we just go in the garden? Can we go and look at the flowers? And we'd have to walk around the house. And my choice was always, let's go to the animal places. Let's go to the farms. Let's go to the zoo. I wanted to do more adventurous. Let's go to a theme park. So we were all different. The weeks that it was her turn, I was a bit like, this is boring. And I'm sure the weeks it was my turn, she was like, well, it's all right, but it's not my choice. So, you know, naturally, as people, we don't all do everything together. Why would we expect our dogs to? So it's okay to have individual activities, individual hobbies for your dogs, to go on a day out with one of them and not take the others. And I think most multi-dog household owners feel guilty leaving a dog at home. Don't get me wrong, I do too. I hate it. I go, God, I wish they could all come. But if they're not going to enjoy it, what's the point? Obviously, every now and again, you know, you have to do stuff you don't enjoy. But through choice, why make my dog who's nervous of like new things go to a busy town? What's the point? He's not going to enjoy it. We can gradually expose him to stuff in training and get him used to it. But if he's never going to enjoy it, why take him? And I think it's not just on days out. It's also like on walks. You know, my dogs, again, I don't often take them together because they all think a walk is different depending on where we go, like the value of it. Rem, again, would walk anywhere. He's not bothered. Fred likes a nice quiet place. He quite happily goes somewhere like, you know, somewhere like the woods or wherever. Dave just likes to be free. He just likes to have no stress and just go, I'm plodding along. So they all want something different from a walk. They all want something different from life. Therefore, I mean, yes, it's a bit of a pain for me, but I do walk my dog separately quite often if I'm going out because A, it's quality time, you know, quality time with us and the one dog. It's no different if you have kids. How nice is it to spend one-on-one time with a parent? I always, again, remember when I was a kid, I think we must have been preparing for something. I think we were preparing for like going like on a brownie pack holiday or something where we had to stay away from home, and we hadn't stayed away from home. So when I was about 7, or I think it was maybe 7 or 8, we got to go and have an individual sleepover at my grandmother's house. Wowzers. Only time I've ever slept at my grand's. I don't know why we didn't do it more often. It was so much fun. But we got one-on-one time. My mum had then the day and night with one of us, and the other one got to spend one-on-one time with the grandparents, which was amazing. It was so nice to have that quality time one-on-one. I do it with my kids. Last month I went to Centre Parks for a couple of days with my youngest daughter, and then this week I went to the spa with my eldest daughter. One-on-one time, because it's nice to have individual time. And I do the same with my dogs, because they don't all like the same thing. Obviously they influence each other's behaviour. So having one-on-one time together means we can work on the training stuff that's individual to that dog. We can make sure the walk's tailored to that dog, and we just have some relaxing quality time together. I don't feel guilty about taking one out because there are 2 at home. And that's why I think 3 is the magic number. If I take 2 out and leave 1 at home, I feel a little bit worse. But again, it depends on the dog. It's only Dave that actually would probably be happy being left at home on his own. Rem wouldn't. But that's, it's working out logistics. So there's nothing wrong with doing individual stuff. Likewise with training. Just because your last dog, or just because one of your dogs likes doing a particular sport, doesn't mean your other one has to. Find something that they like, because a lot of dog sports I think we do for the people, for our benefit, because we enjoy it. But it is good to work out what your dog likes. So again, all of my dogs do different activities. Rem loves scent detection and tracking. That's his thing. He loves it. He gets loads from it. He's good at it. Dave goes, don't see the point. What's the point in this rubbish? He much prefers doing something calm and sort of relaxed at his own pace. So he tends to do a little bit of hoopers. He's not very great at it, but he does it. And it's his pace and it's his thing, and he's like quite happy with it. Fred doesn't really have a thing. Love him. He just doesn't have much motivation for doing things that I'd like him to do. In terms of sports, we just are still working our way through life. But he's quite happy he's just happy just chilling, to be honest. So we do different things together. I bring them into the office one at a time. So I have some quality time with them in the office, one of them. Because I'd probably not get any work done if all 3 of them came into the office with me. Because I'd constantly be like, guys, can you just stop mucking around and stop playing together? Whereas 1, it's nice, they're here by themselves. They get to see people by themselves. They get to be with me by themselves. Individual preference. It is so, so important. Don't beat yourself up thinking that you're leaving a dog out, missing one out, and it's not fair on them. If they have individual needs and individual sort of preferences, make the most of it. Let them do that. And obviously that kind of comes down to, obviously we've talked about outings and walks and training. It comes down to things like food, diet preference. One might eat a certain diet, one might eat a different. What's right for one isn't right for the other. The next thing, obviously we've talked about individuality. The next thing is important for multi-dog households is learning control and management, and how valuable that is. So we talk about control and management in everything we do. It's basically how can we be in control of the situation we're in? How can we manage situations to prevent our dogs doing stuff we don't want them to do? Think of it like the horse, the gate's already bolted. What's it called? What's the phrase? Close the gate, the horse is already bolted. You know what I mean? So we as people tend to be very reactive. We tend to wait for a problem to happen and then try and fix it. Whereas if we are proactive and go, let me prevent that happening in the first place, A, stress-free. 2, your dog doesn't learn the unwanted behaviour. They don't have an opportunity to practice it. So actually it's being proactive, but it's solving issues at the same time. So control and management in a multi-dog household is things like giving them all their individual space, especially when you're integrating a new dog into the family. They have to have their individual spaces. So using a divider, using a stair gate to separate space and giving them space is really valuable. Control and management in terms of food. Don't feed them all in the same space. Give them all their spaces to eat. So all of my dogs actually do eat well together, which is strange because Fred will resource guard, not like majorly. I've talked about it again in the podcast before. He'll resource guard a little bit, but he doesn't ever with dinner, which is really interesting. So very weird observation there. So they all eat in the kitchen, but they all eat in an individual corner of the kitchen. And they're quite happy with that. If they have chews, then again, they're giving them in separate spaces. They're free to be together, but I give them at different points of the living room. But I always give them extras. So I've got 3 dogs, but I put out 4 or 5 chews so that whoever finishes first has another option. They don't have to go and steal somebody else's. And so they're not bad around food, but when I give them something like a raw bone, I always separate them because I just think this is really high value and it's special. So they always have completely separate spaces with stair gates up. Controlling those situations is really important. I say when you're sort of settled in and you know your dogs well, less important because you know what they like, what they don't like. But when you're settling in or introducing a new dog, integrating a new dog into the house, control and management is incredibly important. When you bring a puppy in to a existing household with the dog in it, they have to have their spaces. Both dogs have to have their spaces. So it's really, really, really important to think about how can I create situations where they can succeed and not always be reacting. And I think it kind of leads us on to the next few points really, but body language. As a multi-dog, any dog owner, every dog owner needs to know body language. They have to understand it. For you to have a successful relationship with your dog, you need to understand how they're communicating. We communicate by talking, obviously, hence you're listening to a podcast, but dogs communicate through body language. They read our body language, they give off body language. The problem is that most of us don't read it. We don't understand what we're seeing. And it's probably the most common area that people are completely unaware of that we work with, but we can't seem to get people to understand the importance of it before they come to work with us. It's one of those weird things that you just think, but then I suppose it's British culture really. You go to a foreign country and just not bother learning the language. Let's say we've all done that because we don't need to. Everyone talks English. So I think we're kind of a little bit lazy in that respect. So, I know I've done it, been to countries and I don't speak a word of the language. You pick up the hello, the goodbye, the thank you, and that's about it. But with a dog, you're living with them 24/7. You need to understand how they're communicating. We put all the onus on them. We expect them to do the learning. We expect them to communicate with us and them to read us. But we don't ever go back and say, right, okay, I'll understand what you're saying to me. So every dog owner needs it. But when you've got a multi-dog household, I think it's so incredibly important because obviously, yes, your dog's talking to you, but they're talking to each other. And most people will not read the subtle body language signals that dogs are giving off because they don't know they're there. They don't know the language, fair. And then it escalates quite quickly and then dogs can end up having little scraps or arguments. And it's purely because they haven't read body language. Obviously, our job as dog, and this kind of bursts into the next point, but our job as dog owners is to intervene, not to leave them to it. So these points are going to merge. Let's say that. So we've got the body language, you need to understand that. It's our job as dog owners of a multi-dog household to interrupt and intervene our dogs, for which we need to know body language. So that's why they go hand in hand. There's this old sort of thing that people just go, oh, they'll sort it out, leave them to it. No, it's not fair. It is not fair to leave 2 dogs to it to sort it out themselves. You wouldn't leave 2 kids screaming and fighting without trying to intervene, hitting each other and throwing things at each other. You would help them until they're old enough to know how to manage a situation. We have to do the same with dogs. So it's our job as dog humans to intervene and help our dogs grow a relationship. The only way we can do that is if we know body language. So dog communication is fascinating. There's so much to it. I'm not going to profess I'm an expert, but I do know quite a bit because obviously I spend a lot of time with dogs. But every dog's individual and every dog gives off different body language. There's lots of different, we call it like the ladder of, well, this kind of miscommunication. They call it the ladder of aggression, but actually it's kind of a ladder of sort of subtle communication to the bigger communication. So you've got little things, they call it a ladder because it's like rungs. You have to climb the ladder. So the low level stuff at the bottom rung is like the really subtle bits of communication, like ear flicks and eye changes, etc., mouth changes. They're all subtle. And then if those things don't work, then behaviour steps up to the next one. So we move on to the next rung, and those things on the next rung are maybe a little bit more obvious. So, for example, lip curling, hackles going up on the back, that kind of stuff. Then the next rung is a little bit more serious, and then obviously at the top of the rungs, the top of the ladder, you've got bites. So it escalates. The behaviour escalates depending on whether they're being listened to. And obviously in a multi-dog household, especially if you've got like a young puppy, they aren't used to the dog. They aren't used to communicating. They think a bit irrationally because they're puppies. And they often miss those subtle signs. And the subtle signs are really, really, really important because it avoids it escalating. So we need to teach our dogs to interrupt, to sort of recognise each other's body language and then know how to separate and interrupt it themselves. And the only way they can do that often is if we are there to interrupt. So it's our job to interrupt, but you can only interrupt and intervene and help them and show them an alternative if you understand the body language yourself. Hence, these 2 points merge quite nicely together. So those things are going to help you in your journey. I'm lucky. I'm really, really lucky. My dogs get on really, really well. Touch wood. Fingers crossed. Maybe it's just a fluke. I don't know. But they do get on really well. To be fair, Fred took longer to integrate into the house. Dave was like, I've already got a brother, I don't need another one, thanks. And it took probably a month of Dave to accept him, which is really strange because he loves every dog. He adored Rem coming in, he adored my mum's puppy coming in, but for Fred, for some reason, he was like, don't like him. So it was a month of lots and lots of, Fred, you learn how to respect him. Fred, don't go near him. Look at the signal he's giving off, move away. And me helping. Lots of stair gates, lots of have our space, lots of managing puppy, not Dave. Dave was giving communication. Puppy needed to learn how to read that and how to respect it. Now, after that month, they get on brilliantly. They have lovely communication. They play together loads more than Rem ever does with anyone. He's not really a doggy dog, if that makes sense. But it's all because I could understand the body language. I knew when to intervene to help them to manage it. And they've learned to respect each other and to communicate effectively between them. So there's a lot, obviously, yes, there's so many benefits of having a multi-dog household. Oh, I love it. But there's so much we have to be aware of to help it be successful. And it is challenging, especially if, you know, you've got different breeds who conflict, because some dogs' breeds do conflict each other. Sometimes, you know, they just don't necessarily get on as well as you'd like them to. Sometimes it's hard to manage the time, but recognising their individual preference, really, really, really important in everything, every aspect, even down to like what beds they like. You know, individual preference is really important. The control and management part of being proactive in how they interact and what spaces they have, etc., really important. The body language, if you don't know anything about body language, find out about it. You can get online courses. We do a course that's in person, but I'll try and talk about it on the podcast. Maybe we'll have an episode about body language. And it is your job to help dogs. Don't leave your dogs in a multi-dog household to sort it out themselves, because it's our job to help them with that. So this is obviously useful again for integrating holiday dogs as well. So can just bear these things in mind. It's obviously, as always with the podcast, this isn't a how-to, this isn't a this is what you should do and it's magically going to work, but it's just helping you to think about things from different perspectives. As always, if you want specific individual advice, then you need to work with a trainer individually. So hopefully this has been useful. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you all very soon. Thank you for listening to The Dynamic Dog Owner with me, Debbie Potter. See you next time.